Hi, this is just going to be a pretty simple experiment with some plaster moulding. For another one of these throwaway plastic trays from a packet of biscuits here again. And I've often wondered if these shapes here, these kind of moulded, vacuum formed shapes, could be cast in some way, and would they be useful for something tabletop related, maybe some sort of terrain or scenery, maybe little buildings or walls or something like that. So what I thought I would try is using some plaster of Paris to cast these. The plaster isn't going to be particularly durable, but it's cheap and easy to use, and I thought it would be interesting to see how well it captures some of these surface details that's in the plastic tray there. I've got a mixing bowl and a little set of scales here, and I had spent some time trying to work out how much of the plaster I would need to fill this mould up. Just got a little container of some typical plaster Paris. It's a 100 to 75 type mixture, and I'm going to need roughly half a kilogram of plaster, which might be quite a large amount. In terms of working out what I would need, I actually just filled the mould up using some water and then measuring the weight of what I had. So I reckon I'm going to need most, if not all, of this plaster to fill the mould. Yeah, I think for the purposes of this experiment, I won't go and create too much plaster in case it just goes to waste. So I think I'll just make up a smaller batch, maybe 200 grams of plaster, mixed with another 150 grams of water. There's no point making too much of this stuff at this stage. And then just a case of giving that a good mix. It's going to be quite a messy process, so set up your desk accordingly. I don't think there's any way to avoid getting some spillages and splatters from this. I just put a little bit in to start, and then use a little tool here to encourage the plaster into some of those finer details at the bottom of the mould. Be nice to try and get rid of the air bubbles, but I suspect that I might not be able to avoid that. Okay, just try and get that to settle out as flat as possible on the top. I think this will be enough just for the sake of doing a test here, rather than mixing up a huge amount. Surprising how much you need to fill the mould. I did a calculation to get the entire amount, and it was 1.5 kilograms worth, which seems a bit overkill. But I'll let that sit for half an hour and see how it looks. That's them pulled out of that mould. I'm going to have to leave them to fully dry, but you can see there that it's captured that texture, those patterns quite well. They feel kind of sturdy. They'll get lighter the more the water evaporates out of them as they dry. The thing now would be, are they any use for gaming or whatever? They're plaster, so they would easily break if you were to drop them or chip them. But I mean, a lot of the things in the hobby are easy to break. I mean, most of the models are pretty delicate, to be honest. What you need to decide is what scale are these at. You could use them at 28mm. You can kind of imagine them being useful for laying out a few miniatures at that kind of scale. They could work. Or perhaps even at the epic scale with some miniatures that I've been painting. They could be used as pretty simple buildings, structures. They've got a kind of vaguely industrial look to them. Maybe an option that way as well. I mean, looking at a kind of more modern piece of epic scenery, you know, a similar sort of scale to that, size-wise. So maybe a possibility there. Actually looking at an old epic book where you see some of the scenery. This is the Orc and Squat warlords. Yeah, like that kind of scenery there. You know, you could imagine as a starting point, as a basis for a little bit more work, moulding that into a base could be a useful starting point, just given the pattern on the outside walls. I was tempted, of course, to do a little bit of kit bashing on them, various bits from the bits box. You know, you can get some stuff that's vaguely in that epic scale. You know, and you could start to really improve them. Maybe make some little doorways out of suitable pieces to help sell them as being buildings. But these are some nice parts, and I've got something else in mind for these that I think I would like to keep them for. But nonetheless, you can see the effect. You know, if you find interesting bits to use, how you could decorate these pretty simple objects and make them look even more industrial and suitable for the scale. I think my preference is going to be to paint them up, probably for use in that kind of 28mm scale. I think that would suit them. It's a nice height for that, and maybe some of these resin parts, it wouldn't take much to just add one or two key objects here and there to make them into walls, or just kind of general items that you could use to create some cover with. I think I might do it that way. Just the odd resin piece, kind of lower stakes, and using some of those nice bits from the bits box. Okay, so I think to just round out the video, I'll get these primed. Hopefully that'll help seal them so the paint's got a chance of not just absorbing into the plaster. You've got to keep them dry. You know, if you get water on these, it's going to cause trouble. If you drop them, I'm sure they'll break instantly. But I'll get them painted up and see how they look. Okay, and here just to show you what I've ended up with. Took a bit of time just basing them on some thick card. Glue down my standard sand mix for that. And then I've used some resin parts, other things that are easy to replace, just to give them a little bit of detail for the next stage. So I'll get them primed and then can get on with painting. So that's how they look with the primer done. Always helps bring them together, makes them look good. I think for the colour scheme, I'm going to try and mimic what I see here on this label for this Vallejo wash effects. You can see the grey undercoat and then the lighter cream colour sprayed on top. I'll try some masking with the Humbrol Maskol latex type product, and that's going to go onto maybe the edges and exposed corners and things. And it's something that after spraying I can peel that off to reveal the grey underneath. Yeah, so it'll just be a case of going around each of them like this, applying it with the sponge. Hopefully provide quite a nice chipping effect. I can't use the products I would normally use because many of them rely on, using water to reveal the effect, and with this being plaster underneath, I don't think that's a good idea using the water, so this will be a nice drier method. Yeah, so you can see the top coat now on there. That's solid, kept it quite light. The only problem is going to be spotting where the masking fluid is, so that I can remove it. Start doing this one, and you get a nice effect. But like I say, it's just tricky spotting where the masking fluid is to get started. I don't want to damage the plaster beneath. But you do find that it does come away easy enough, and you get quite a nice effect from it. It's just going to be a little bit time consuming, so I'm not sure. Perhaps would have worked better maybe with the masking fluid being a bit thicker. I'll work my way around the models and see what I can do. You certainly need your nails in order to find and pick away the masking fluid. In the end, it's produced quite a nice realistic effect for that kind of corroded paintwork, the chipped paintwork. I think now to get these finished, I'll just do some enamel washing, some winter streaking grime here, and with plenty of the odourless thinners, I'll just do a general wash over all of them to get some of that dirt and grime. But I do like the results of that masking fluid, that umbral maskol. It's a nice way of getting that chipping effect on your paintwork without the need for airbrushes or other things. And before all that dries, maybe come in with a little bit of the rust here and there, just for a bit of a colour change. Maybe just where the paintwork's been chipped away. I think I'll maybe try and use some of the Vallejo wash effects also, which is a water-based acrylic, so it will behave differently. I don't mind, I'm just going to use it. Might do some interesting things when mixing. Sometimes it's tempting to just keep going with the weather, but it's useful just as a bit of an experiment. Just trying to use this rust wash to indicate some sitting rust that's gathering here and there. So in terms of what these things actually are, I think they're useful as scatter terrain for sure. It's definitely the look they've got. I don't know if they're still operational as whatever they are or were, but a lot of the kind of just general dents and bulges and different shapes that occurred when making the mould with the plaster. All those kind of shapes just tie in nicely as being dents in the metalwork. And this wash effects rust does do a nice job of producing that leaking, spreading rust effect. So here's the end result. A little experiment using that biscuit tray as a mould for some pretty simple plaster casting. I think it's worked out okay. I think you could use these, kind of nice bit of scatter terrain, a few bits glued on for some visual interest, and then a bit of weathering and painting to make them look a bit more like something you would find in the ash wastes perhaps. Scale wise, they work really well. As I said before, I think they'd also work at the epic scale, just with the right sort of things glued onto them, or even just left as they were, as a really quick and simple way of casting some block shapes that you could lay out and use as large buildings. Not sure about the durability. I think if you were to drop them, they'd soon smash or chip. But you could say that for most of the terrain and the models in the hobby. But nonetheless, it was an experiment I wanted to try, and something I could maybe look at in the future if I need some more items like this. So maybe if you're about to throw out some old packaging, maybe take a second look and see if there's perhaps something there that you could use as a basis for something like this. If you want something more durable, why not try casting with resin? Probably a bit more expensive, of course, but you might find some useful shapes here and there. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching the video.